Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. The ability to share personal information is at your fingertips when it comes to the internet and social media. But what happens when the wrong person gets a hold of that information? Doxing is the soon-to-be criminal act of sharing someone's personal information online with malicious intent. KLTV 7's Lauren Tier explains why legislators say the new law was needed.
What everybody is seeing in law enforcement or in the legal world is that this stuff is on the rise, and it's not going away. In fact, it's getting worse.
Attorney Justin Roberts is referring to doxing. According to research from safehome.org, over 40 million Americans have personally experienced doxing, the disclosure of personal information on an online platform. House Bill 611 was recently signed into law in the 88th legislature to criminalize it. According to the bill written by House Representative Giovanni Capriglione and Representative Josie Garcia, a person commits an offense if the person posts on a publicly accessible website the residence address or telephone number of an individual with the intent to cause harm or a threat of harm to the individual or a member of the individual's family or household. Roberts says this law targets a problem that is becoming more and more common.
Doxing is definitely a form of cyberbullying, and this law was specifically intended to cover two specific types of cyberbullying in the sense of releasing the address or the phone number of the individual. So there are cyberbullying laws in Texas, and this was meant to be a complement to that, to make sure that these specific types of attacks on people are criminalized.
The offense will be punished as a Class B or potentially Class A misdemeanor.
A Class B misdemeanor is punishable by up to 6 months in jail. Now, if any kind of assaultive or case comes from or stemming from this law, it is a Class A misdemeanor, and that's punishable by up to a year in jail.
Roberts says prosecutors in these cases have a sometimes difficult task.
The problem they'll run into is proving the intent to cause harm, and that's always a tricky thing to try to prove what was in someone's mind when they released information to the public.
He also says it's important to think before posting any kind of personal information online. Lauren Tier, KLTV 7 News.
And this new law goes into effect Friday, September the 1st.